So we're going to go through what happens when you have three charges lined up in a row. And in the scenario that we have here, this is question from the Fusion textbook. It's the very last question in the static or the Coulombs Law section. You have three charges, X, Y, and Z, and they're in a line, collinear. Okay, you're given the distance between them. It happens that it's 5 and 5. And you were told that you have to work out what the charge on Z is and it must be of the correct size that it cancels out the charge that Y already feels from X. So X and Y are both positive charges. So X is basically pushing Y over this way. So that's what this is. F, the force on Y due to X. You need to calculate how big does Z have to be so that it produces an equal size force but in the opposite direction. So this purple line here is going to be the force that is due to Z. We don't know how big Z is, and that's what the question is. What polarity, as in is it positive or negative, and what size? So the positive or negative is easy to deal with. We'll do that first. You can see that they're both positive charges, so they're repelling, hence Y is being pushed over this way. Z has to push it over this way, so they have to be both the same sign, so Z has to be a positive as well, and it's going to repel and push Y over to the left. The more difficult part then is to work out, well, how big, what's the magnitude of Z? Now, where we're going to start with this is that the size of both forces is going to be the same. So the force between Y and Z is going to be the same as the force between X and Y. And we're using Coulombs law twice here, basically. The force between Y and Z is just going to be, well, we don't know what Z is, so all we can do is put in what Y is. So that's going to be 14 by 10 to the minus 6, and we'll call Z just Q, all over 4 pi E naught. I'm not putting in what E naught is for the time being, because we are going to be able to cancel that and get rid of it in a few minutes. And the distance is 5 centimeters, so that's 0.05 of a meter to be squared. So that's my force between Y and Z. That's equal to the force between X and Y. And we know that they are 2 by 10 to the minus 6 coulombs and 14 by 10 to the minus 6 coulombs. So this we can work out. Again, we have our 4 pi E naught, and the distance you can see here is also 5 centimeters. So 0.05 all to be squared. Now, here's where you can make life a little bit easier for yourself. Sorry now. Because you have 4 pi E naught over on this side of the equation, and you have 4 pi E naught on this side of the equation, and not only are they both on either side, but they are both on the bottom of the fraction, and that's very important. So that means that this can be cancelled out with this. And what in effect I'm doing here is I'm multiplying this side by 4 pi E naught, so that cancels that out, and then I multiply this side by 4 pi E naught, and that cancels that out. That leaves me with a much simpler equation to solve. So 14 now, you might say, why are you not cancelling out the 0.05? I could very easily for this equation. It just happens that both the distances are the same. That's not always going to be the case with these problems. So you will always have 4 pi E naught appearing both sides, but it's quite uncommon for the distances to be the same on both sides. So I'm just going to not cancel those out and continue on. But for this question, you absolutely could. Okay. So that looks a lot easier than what we had up here. And when you multiply those out, you get something like this. 5.007 by 10 to the 7q is equal to 1.001 by 10 to the 2. And that gives us q then is equal to, so you divide both sides by 5.07007 by 10 to the 7, and you get q, the charge is 2 by 10 to the minus 6 coulombs. Okay, and just put your plus sign in at the very end to show that that is a positive sign. Okay, and just to recap why it's a positive sign, because that, so now you have the size of z, that has to repel, it has to push y in that direction. And the only way you can do that is if it's the same sign as y, like charges repel. Okay, that should be a template for you to use for any other question that comes up like that. You are just using Coulomb's law twice in these types of questions where you have 3 charges.